NAIA football is the true version of what college football is supposed to be. And it is the best classroom experience an 18 to 22-year-old male can have. One of the most valuable parts of a college education is that experience. It's life in a microcosm, and it's just something special for a young man to have to experience.
And don't you let a moment go without thinking about what's there for you to reach out and grasp.
Welcome in to another weekend of NAIA football. I am your host, Jason Dannelly, as we get set for another night of NAIA football with Dannelly and Donley. It was a wacky weekend in NAIA football where we saw 7 teams in the top 25 lose. Now, some of those losses were to other teams in the top 25, but there were some upsets along the way. We're going to go through those games and a whole lot more. Plus, in about a half hour, one of the head coaches from one of those games should be joining us, barring any major catastrophes that tend to happen sometimes with technology. So before we announce that and get everybody all hyped up about who we got coming on the show, I want to make sure he's actually able to connect with us. I'm your host, Jason Dannelly. Pat Donley joins us momentarily, but before he comes on, let's take a look at what's happening and what has happened in the world of NAIA football by looking at some of those top performances from this weekend. Now, this is not an all-encompassing look at all the best players and the top plays from this weekend, but just merely me going through the box scores going, wow, that performance helped propel these people to a victory. And it starts with Cavante Baker at Friends University, 214 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Falcons ran all over Abla, 56-10. David Hayes of St. Thomas in a game that we'll talk about a little bit later on here with Pat Donley, 12 receptions, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns in that 33-17 win that St. Thomas had over St. Xavier. And then Bethel, Tennessee quarterback Cade Hewitt, 28 carries for 125 yards, 2 touchdowns as the Wildcats won 35-0 over Thomas. I bring this one up because in the game, Bethel, who last year was one of the best passing teams in all of NAIA football, their passing statistics for this game against Thomas, 0 for 3 for 0 yards. They did it all on the ground. Baker quarterback Truman Julesgaard, he was 22 for 28, 261 yards and 4 touchdowns passing. He also added 86 yards rushing, and they won 43-21 over William Penn in a game where they actually trailed early on, 14-10. Lindsey Wilson, running back David Gardner Jr., 19 carries, 155 yards and 2 touchdowns as Lindsey Wilson put away Bluefield 44-20. And then, well, misspelling there on my part, Sam Tumulty threw for 173 yards, 3 touchdowns, while also rushing for 146 yards and 2 touchdowns in their win over Lawrence Tech. Missouri Baptist quarterback Jordan Simpson, 19 for 41, 275 yards, 3 touchdowns. Pretty good day for a quarterback, not earth-shattering statistics. It was a 44-37 OT win. What puts them on this list, Missouri Baptist trailed in this game 27-2 before they came back and got the victory in overtime. Heck of a performance from them. Concordia running back Mark Arp, 32 carries, 210 yards, 3 touchdowns in their win over Dakota Wesley, and also DJ McGarvey, the quarterback, 309 yards passing in that game for the Bulldogs. Mid-American Nazarenes, Adrian Parsons, 17 of 23, 356 yards, 5 touchdowns, all in the first half. They were up 50-0 on Peru State in this one, and this was a game that I was looking at saying, you know, if Peru challenges Mid-American Nazarene, maybe Peru could be challenging a little more in that Heart North. Well, maybe Mid-American Nazarene's just a whole lot better. We'll talk more about that game later on as well. And the last performances we want to bring up, Bethel, Kansas quarterback DJ Sears, 185 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 73 yards rushing, also with 2 touchdowns in their overtime win, 27-24 over Ottawa. And Keiser running back Andrew Burnett, part of that two-headed monster that they've got with the Seahawks, 134 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Meisinger added 105 yards, 42-33 win over D2 Newberry. The defending champs are off to a 2-0 start, and now they get into their NAIA schedule. I tell you what, some fantastic performances in NAIA football. And we've got 3 big games that we're going to talk about momentarily. To help us talk about them is my co-host, Mr. Pat Donley. Pat, pretty good football yesterday.
Really, really good. And I'll tell you, the matchups, I love seeing the matchups early season. You know, it seems like we've been talking about that the last 2 weeks. There's not been clunkers. There's not been those weeks where, like, man, there's nothing to really talk about. Not real big games. They're huge games here from the very get-go of this season. So, yeah, tons to talk about. Let's jump in.
Well, give it about 25 minutes when we talk about this week's schedule, because I had to stretch. There wasn't 3 top 25 matchups to go, hey, here's the featured games. It was kind of,
Yeah,
there's some really good games, but like we're not talking. There's one top 25 matchup. We'll get into that. Pat, anything that stood out to you as we kind of get through those top performances that you kind of went, wow, how about that?
Well, yeah, the top performance is fantastic. I love seeing Keiser go 2-0 versus Division II opponents. How about that? Great for the affiliation. Great on them. The two-headed monster strikes again. They're doing it the same way that they that took them to a national championship last year. Love watching the St. Thomas St. X game. That was interesting and fun to watch. We're going to dive deep into that one. Yeah, they're just good football all around, and you know, competitive games. And we'll talk about the Benedictine and Grandview game. Some good stuff, and then kind of a little bit of a shocker with College of Idaho stubbing their toe. Like you talked about the entire, since we've started this show this season, we talk about the Frontier Conference and just the parity. It's crazy. You hit the nail on the head a couple weeks ago saying that.
Yeah, it is crazy, and I did have to correct some people on Twitter, and I had to use some foul language as part of it. But you know, it's one game, and I'm not. We'll talk about it here in a second. I'll do that. Let's talk about this game first. St. Thomas, St. Xavier. This was a game I picked St. Xavier to win this. I kind of felt like travel. St. Thomas having to get out of Miami Gardens, Florida, go to Chicago. St. Xavier's at home. They've got a lot of upperclassmen. They've got some really good athletes there. They're going to be able to hold course and steer this ship right. They'll get the win. I was wrong. St. Thomas on film. I watched this entire game. Just the better team. They were a better football team than St. Xavier yesterday, athletically and really scheme-wise. I think they had St. X guessing for a good portion of this game.
And we can dive deep into this, Jason. You know, football nerd stuff can talk about it. I thought St. Thomas executed a game plan, both sides of the football, perfectly. It was outstanding. And again, long travel. Went to Chicago and just absolutely executed things beautifully. I thought the balance offensively from St. Thomas's offense is something to really, really pay attention to. They do things very, very efficiently. Tremendous quarterback play, balance with the run game with Farmer, who is, I tell you what, Jason, first time I really watched him closely this season. He's not one of those guys like, man, he's a big, strong, physical guy or he's a burner. He's kind of all rolled into one. He's hard to bring down. It seems like he's always getting 4. If there's nothing there, he's falling forward for 4 yards. Then he'll bust a 10, 15, 20-yard run. He pass protects well. I saw that out of him. Because St. X kind of, as these things weren't going well, as St. Thomas has moved the football, tons of plug blitzes from the inside linebackers where Farmer's picking them up and the ball's getting out and delivered on time. You talk about, Watson's performance of throwing the football 5 touchdowns. My goodness. And, and Hayes being so outstanding with the big plays. They're a fun team to watch. That's my kind of football, the great balance of run and pass and high execution level with the athletes and great quarterback play. But just very impressed with St. Thomas's game plan offensively. I'm an offensive guy. But even defensively, forcing St. X, they just begging them to run the ball. And St. X's offense, I love Mike or Coach Newell, just awesome guy. Mark Newell's a great guy. He loves throwing the football. But they're playing a passive 2-shell, playing a lot of man under defense, just begging them to run the ball. And times St. X did run the ball efficiently, but they're a passing team. And St. Thomas has the athletes to match up with those receivers and really cause some problems with their execution. So as good as St. Thomas's execution offensively was, I thought St. X's offensive execution was really challenged by great defensive play. So fun game to watch.
I was going to bring that up, was the defensive execution by St. Thomas. As I watched that game, I just kept watching it, and I'm not as much of an X and O guy as you are because you lived in that world for 20 years. But just as a football fan, I'm watching that, and I'm used to watching St. Xavier football, and I'm going, God, they can't get anybody behind them. They're not getting anybody deep. They're not getting anybody over the top. And that's X's game, kind of lull you to sleep underneath, hit that guy, down the sideline, deep over the middle, those sort of things. Hacky football guy, I'll say that out here. Mm-hmm. But St. Thomas did a very good job, like you said, with their game plan, keeping everything in front of them, saying, mm-hmm. You run the ball. And guess what? We got some pretty good linebackers that are going to knock you around and allow you not really to run the football. I mean, mm-hmm. Jesse Plunkett, 54 yards running the ball for St. Xavier. Most of that, kind of came later on, early on in this game. St. Thomas had some things that they did defensively that, really shut down the Cougars. And the Bobcats just kept plugging away on offense, putting up the points. And all of a sudden at halftime, you go in, you're like, wow, it's 27-7. And I don't know if it feels that close.
No, it didn't, honestly. And talk about a well-executed, both sides of football, road victory. That's it. I mean, as good as you can play it. Hopefully we get some more information later on with a conversation. But I thought it was tremendous. It was a great football game. It was fun to watch St. Thomas play a top-quality opponent like St. X and do what they did. It was very impressive to watch. They are a fun team to watch. And look out, folks. This is a good football team.
Very good football team. The Victory Sports Network Top 25 poll will be out in the morning. The coaches poll will come out later in the day. I usually try to have mine out by 5 in the morning. I've already done it. I'll give a hint. St. Thomas moves up. They're going to be higher. I don't know what the coaches will do. There's some movement in front of them. I do see St. Thomas probably moving up a spot or two. I'm moving up St. Thomas quite a bit in my top 25, especially after watching this game, seeing what they've been able to do. It's been a tremendous start to the season. A lot of season left, though, as we go into our next game. And that is, kind of a game that a few years ago you would only see in the postseason. Now you're going to see it in Hart Conference play. Number 4, Grandview taking on number 12, Benedictine. Early on, Benedictine comes out. They get that 7-0 lead. They get up on Grandview. They're kind of stymieing them a little bit. And the thing about Grandview, and the thing I always give Coach Woodley credit for, is the stick to the plan. Don't get rattled. We're going to methodically go through that. And that's what Grandview did. All of a sudden it was 7-3. Then it was 10-7. And then more points, and 52-28 in a final. Jackson Waring with a heck of a game. 9 of 20, not the best passing day, but 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. But he also ran for 123 yards. I think that shows a lot about this kid and just his ability to, if it's not happening with the arm, he can get it done with his legs. He can be asked to do a lot of things. A great performance by him on the Grandview side, and by the Grandview defense also holding Benedictine down. Here's a team that scored 48 and 45 points in their first 2 games. Had a huge victory in that week 1 over Morningside. Benedictine's a really good football team, and Grandview held them to 28 and got the victory.
I think it's great to see because we talk about Grandview's defense all the time. In the last 2 years, we both had them picked to make a serious run at the national championship last year. And now you're seeing the scoring as well and holding, Benedictine. Yeah, it's 28 points, but it's 28 points to a team, like you said, that has been extremely high power, this season, knocking off Morningside. Was that just a week ago or was that 2 weeks ago now?
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
Seems like yesterday.
Seems like yesterday, right? But, tremendous job by Grandview of putting the points up, still playing that tremendous Viking defense and against a great opponent and winning a game like this, that raises an eyebrow because those are 2 top-end teams, and that final score is like, yeah, Grandview's the real deal. So, I'm looking forward to kind of how things shake out towards the end of the year. We saw this a lot last year. But again, when it matters the most late in the year, we want to see Grandview continue that dominance. So eye raising a little bit that score, but we've got to continue that.
The other thing I look at with Grandview is I kind of feel like the last 2 regular seasons, they did not have a test in weeks 1 through 12. I mean, they played some good teams. I think last year they beat Mid-American Nazarene week 1, 24-0. I think that was their closest regular season game last year. So I don't feel like in the last couple of years, Grandview in the regular season had that test. Now, granted, this one's very early in the year and they still have a lot of season left, but I think it's games like this that helps Grandview potentially in the postseason when they get a College of Idaho thrown at them like last year, that maybe it's not such a shock to the system, the type of athletes that are coming at them. And that's credit to Benedictine and what Benedictine was able to bring into this game.
Totally agree. Having a playoff quality opponent that's had success already this season. This still Benedictine moved the football. I mean, you see the statistics, but Grandview played great defense when they had to, and obviously scoring the points they did has got to be a confidence booster for Grandview moving forward. Certainly.
The third featured game of the weekend involved College of Idaho and Montana Western. And this, again, was a game that I kind of watched cover to cover. And I tell you what, Montana Western looked fantastic. Not only does their new stadium look good, this football team looks good. College of Idaho held down in the first half, 14-0 coming out of that first quarter, 28-10, at the break. And the Bulldogs just looked like they were, I don't want to say they were toying with College of Idaho, but they had College of Idaho figured out, and they were really forcing the Yotes into some uncomfortable situations. The Bulldog offense looked fantastic. Now, these are the latest statistics that I had. I pulled the stats right after the game, and then I looked again last night, and then I saw a press release, and then I saw stats this morning. They were all different. So this is what we're going with for the show. Michael Palandry, 416 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also had 2 on the ground. Dylan Shipley and Eli Norse as wide receivers. Just a fantastic duo for him to throw to, 179 yards and 127 yards. It's the Frontier Conference. The best team in the Frontier Conference is always the real deal. And right now, that team's Montana Western.
Your thoughts compare them to Montana Tech, out of curiosity?
I feel like Montana Western, with what they can do offensively, spreading the field out, slinging it around a little bit, I think that gives them an edge over Montana Tech. I think Montana Tech, if they get into a slobber knocker game where you're going to be a slugfest, if Tech's defense would be able to hold down Western a little bit, then you might look at Tech and go, okay, these guys have got a legitimate chance. But right now, I would say Montana Western, the way they played their first 2 weeks of the year against Eastern Oregon and against College of Idaho, they are the one. I would say the two. I might move Montana Tech into that. I'll be honest. I've watched 3 College of Idaho games this year. They're a very good football team. They're a playoff quality football team. But what I've seen from those other 2 teams early in the season, Pat, makes me feel like they're maybe a little bit further along in the Frontier Conference. Great bulletin board material for College of Idaho now. Freak 3 Sports Network doesn't believe in us.
Well, Western's one of those teams, it's like they play more like a warm weather team. That's the only thing I want to bring up. It's like, how is that going to play in November in the Big Sky Country? Now it's in September. There's not a better place to be on the planet than Montana. November, it's going to change. And you can see this team last year. We watched this team late last season. I think it was the second time they played last season, late in the year. And you can see Montana Western is on that cusp. You can see they're rising quickly with gaining experience in the big games, playing that difficult schedule in that league and doing very, very well. And now you're seeing them break through and putting up 42 points against a team that was in the Final Four last year.
Yep.
And spreading the ball around in crazy offensive numbers. This is an exciting team. We talk about it all the time. I'm beating a dead horse again. It's like a broken record. The parity of this league. It's cool. That's why I wanted your opinion on, kind of where you see things here after week 3 of that conference, because there's so many good teams. And, I've watched Montana Tech extensively, and I love their balance. I love what they do on defense, playmaking ability. And then Montana Western putting a game together like this and knocking off the conference champion from last year. So this is exciting. This is fun to watch. And this league has been fun to watch all season. Hopefully it continues.
Yeah. And I got it thrown at me, Pat, that, it's the whole respect conversation. I'm trying to get my camera to focus here. Come on. There we go. All right. Back out slowly. Still messed up. Anyway. All right. So I had it thrown at me. What's it going to take for Montana Western to get up into the top 2? Could they do it? And my comment on Twitter was, well, yeah, I think they can do it. They've got to obviously win out. But then it's kind of the war of attrition. Then in the NAIA, you've got to have other teams lose. And it was thrown at me by a Montana Western fan that there's certain things that I should do with myself. And then I told him that there was something that he could
Yeah.
do calm
How do you
down.
find this? I didn't see this little Twitter war.
Yeah, a little Twitter war. This camera thing is bothering me. Do I have to be this close to be focused? This is a good look for everyone out there. Okay, we're going to back away slowly. Okay, we got it. Yeah, a little Twitter war happening out there, Pat.
Yeah, those are always fun. Social media. It's called X now, right?
But
X.
Yeah, it's X. But my whole point is, this is like Western's second game of the year. Yeah. College of Idaho's played 3. They're in the frontier. Let's not start worrying about if we're in the top 2. Find a way to get through the rest of your schedule, and it'll all work itself out. Obviously, the coveted spots in NAIA football are number 1 and number 2 because you host the entire way through the postseason. 1 through 4 is not bad. There's only one time you're traveling then, and there's always the possibility of upsets in that top 4 for you to be able to then move up and potentially host. So we are a long ways from that conversation. We can pump the brakes a little bit. We can have ourselves a nice little drink of water, and we can talk about our next game, which not really a big feature game, but they are the number 1 team in the country and the defending champion. So just to throw it out there, Keiser knocked off Newberry College from the Division II, 42-33. Nice win for the defending champs in this one. Early on, they gave up a pick 6. They went down in this game 7-0. Good resilience by the offense and defense, obviously, for the Seahawks and Shea Spencer to come back from that. He threw 2 touchdowns, 210 yards, that two-headed monster in the backfield of Burnett and Meisinger, rushed for 200 yards. A really nice win as Keiser's 2-0 and 2-0 against Division II competition.
I think the scariest thing for NAIA opponents, especially folks in the Sun Conference, is Spencer's back.
Yeah.
Who did not play last year, and they won the national championship. And they're doing all the same things with really, really strong quarterback play. Not to take anything away from the quarterbacks last season, but I don't think neither of the guys that played for the Seahawks last year are this caliber behind center. So you put those 2 tremendous running backs in the offensive line, the run game, with a very, very capable quarterback in that tremendous defense, you got something once again. It's scary to think about that they can maybe be stronger than a year ago. Time will tell. But, boy, it's good on them. They were 0-2 against Division II teams last year. Now 2-0, going into NAIA play. So great for the affiliation, great for Keiser. Couldn't be happier for those guys, and a great representation to our affiliation.
Yeah, love to see. Love to see them 2-0. So let's take a look at that top 25 quick. Of course, just mentioned Keiser got that victory. They play Fort Lauderdale this next week. Northwestern gets the win. They'll go to Midland. College of Idaho, that game with Southern Oregon you see on your screen is the only top 25 action that we will see next week between 2 teams. I'll be interested to see where College of Idaho goes to in the top 25 from the coaches. Grandview goes to Valley, Indiana Wesleyan, and they did lose. They lost to Valparaiso 20-17. Would like to see them get that victory, Pat, but I don't think it's anything that's going to affect them in the ratings postseason. I mean, it's an FCS program, granted Pioneer League, but still an FCS program with advantages that Indiana Wesleyan does not have.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see that and kind of surprised, to be honest with you. I think if they played 5 times, I think Wesleyan would win that series. I wonder if it was emotional, blowout game against St. Francis, and I don't know, looking ahead or not looking, just weren't sharp. Game 2 after emotional victory like that happens all the time. But I expect them to rebound and play well the remainder of the season.
Sometimes good to get that loss early in the season. They didn't get a lot of resistance really in those first 2 games, and this was the first sign maybe of some adversity thrown their way, help those guys snap out of it as they go through the NAIA schedule. Marion with a very dangerous game against Concordia out of Michigan. They came away with a victory, but the Cardinals were right there pushing them all the way. It looked like maybe CUAA was going to get that one, Pat.
Good for those guys. Again, we know the situation. That's a tough scenario. Going down to play at Marion at night's very, very challenging. And, great to see Concordia compete and really make a push for it. It was a tight game, obviously the score, but it's back and forth the entire game. Marion was certainly challenged. Maybe a little wake-up call for them as well as they get into conference play.
Moving through the top 25, Georgetown with the loss to Alabama A&M. They hung with them for a good portion of this game, but then Alabama A&M just pulled away at the end, got that 24-16 victory. Morningside gets a win over Midland 28-21, but this was a game that was also very tight late, and Morningside kind of eked this one out. Midland actually got the ball with about a minute left, I think it was, and had the opportunity to go down the field, but Morningside's defense overcame. So two different style games there. Again, Georgetown loses to an FCS. Morningside beats a conference opponent, but maybe not by the margin that we would have thought, but a win's a win.
Jason, you think Midland's one of the better teams non-ranked out there?
I don't know, only because I need to see what happens between Dordt and Morningside now. You know, Morningside's got these wins. It's been very close. They got beat by Benedictine. That will kind of give me a little bit better idea of where Midland sits. I think that Midland is that next one right now in the Great Plains Athletic Conference. I think you got Northwestern, you got Dordt, you got Morningside, then kind of who's next. I think Midland is that who's next in the GPAC there. Top 25 continues. Evangel gets the win over Sterling. This was a game that was tight early. It was 14-14, I believe, or 17-14 before they got the victory. Dickinson State loses to Division III Wisconsin Stout 22-20. A couple of times inside the red zone with turnovers. That's going to hurt you every single time. And the Blue Hawks found out the hard way that turnovers are going to kill you. And, well, essentially that's what happened there. Baker beats William Penn. This was a game that I mentioned earlier. William Penn actually led 14-10 in this game before Baker pulled away from them. Texas Wesleyan with just a trouncing of North American 80-0. And same with Peru State getting trounced by Mid-American Nazarene. This was 50-0 at halftime. And I didn't watch it, but I checked out the play-by-play. And you go to that second half play-by-play, you're just looking at the stat, 3-yard run, 3-yard run, 2-yard run, 6-yard run, 4-yard run. Like, wow, this one had to be great to sit through the second half. So I'm glad I'm not a parent sometimes of somebody playing in some of these football games.
Yeah, Mid-America's scoring points. They're interesting. And I'm looking forward to next week, Northwestern and Midland, Jason. I am. I guess it's going to be an interesting game.
Yeah, that'll tell me a little bit more how close the Warriors can stick to the Red Raiders in that one. You got Friends, now 3-0, beat Avila 56-10. Reinhardt loses to Southeastern in Florida 28-10. This was a game that was paused for a while because of weather going through the area. It was 21-10 forever. I think they finished it late last night. Reinhardt loses. This is the coach's top 25. I did not actually have Reinhardt in my top 25 this last week. I kind of looked at how they played early in the year, and I thought, they're not quite there yet. I see the coaches will drop them out. I actually think they'll get replaced by the team that beat them, Southeastern in Florida. I'm putting them in my top 25, and I think the Southeastern, they're kind of, we talk about, the next in the GPAC. I think right now in the Sun Conference, Southeastern is the next in that conference to kind of pop in. And Lindsey Wilson gets the win over Bluefield. Southern Oregon, really no resistance from Simpson there. That's a top 25, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Southeastern. We kind of talked about in our preview of the Sun Conference. We thought that might be a team that would get back and really push for contention, in that top 3 or 4 of that league. It's very, very deep now. You look at all those great Florida schools now. But that's an interesting one as well, because with the facilities and, the recruiting base there, that's a hidden gem, I think, that, really could make some noise this season, doing it already here early.
It's early, but I like to point it out sometime. Look who's undefeated. Maybe some names you didn't think would be undefeated on here. Bethel in Kansas, 3-0. Campbellsville, 3-0. Cumberland, 3-0. Dakota State, who I try to be nice, but Dakota State was one of the worst teams in NAIA football last year. I think they were 1-9. They're 3-0 to start the year. Taylor, 3-0. Cumberland's 2-0. And Cumberland's put it to a Pikeville team that you and I saw play 2 games this year and thought, these guys are physical. They're going to get something going. And Cumberland's controlled that game yesterday. Missouri Valley, Southeastern, St. Francis, Texas College. These are the teams that round out kind of the undefeated of, hey, wonder what what's going on outside of the top 25.
And scary for a lot of these conferences. They're like, who are these guys? Some of them, I'll tell you from my experience, is Taylor. I mean, they're winning games against good quality opponents. And I tell you what, they're scary for a lot of people in the Mid-States Football Association, because they're like, Taylor's going to give you everything they got. They're going to be a pain in the butt, but we're going to win the game in the end. I tell you what, they're beating people now, and good on them. It's exciting to see. And that we talked about a couple of these other teams, but a little bit of a surprise, but great to see. We got some parity in these leagues.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I love the fact that we get the opportunity to, kind of start talking about some teams that we don't normally get to. Featured games this week, I kind of landed on these. Kansas Wesleyan just fell out of the top 25. They'll take on Friends. That's a rivalry. College of Idaho will be playing Southern Oregon. Now, this was their ratings last week. College of Idaho is going to fall a little bit. And then a whole list of other games that are happening out there for you to kind of keep your eye on this week. Cumberland's Reinhardt, that's one I want to look at. Is Cumberland's going to be for real? Because Reinhardt, they lost this week to Southeastern, and Southeastern was a better ball club, that's for sure. But is Cumberland's, are they that much better than the rest of that league now? Mm-hmm. And you've got an undefeated Dakota State taking on Valley City, Texas Wesleyan, Oklahoma Panhandle. Oklahoma Panhandle plays tough. They're playing in Goodwell, Oklahoma. Don't just overlook that game. Mm-hmm. And then a couple others on there, Missouri Valley, Florida Memorial, Cumberland, Grandview. Those are some quality games. We do have our guest about to join us. Before we go to him, Pat, any thoughts on these games coming up this weekend?
No, I think Texas Wesleyan's a really good football team. Watching them a couple times in the early season, I really like to see how that goes. Look at Cumberland's. Shan Housekeeper's doing a heck of a job down there. I mean, really is. Against, have won, they're 2-0 or 3-0. We have the undefeated group. But, Reinhardt is a perennial power. It's going to be an interesting game to see. Missouri Valley and Grandview is kind of a traditional game that's always been competitive and back and forth. And, Grandview's coming off of an emotional win where they dominated, another top 25 opponent. So, is there going to be a little bit of a letdown there? So I think there's going to be some good games still. Not like this week or the first 2 weeks for that matter, but there's always exciting games in the NAIA.
I'm excited now because I love going through all that stuff, but I love talking to coaches. And by all accounts, I believe our guest is with us. Coach Rychel, do you got us?
I think so. You got me?
Yeah, we got you. Sometimes technology is not our friend, Coach Rychel, so we appreciate you coming on. And A+ job on your side already, being able to get the camera and the audio and everything going. Thanks for joining us, Coach.
No, I made it. I got that head coach in me now for a while that I didn't even need a GA to set it up. I clicked the buttons and it all worked, man. So we're awesome.
The one positive thing through COVID, you can work videos now, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Right.
Well, Coach, we appreciate you coming on with us here. The biggest thing I wanted to bring you on for was to talk about this weekend. One, great victory. Congratulations. That's a huge win going up to Chicago and getting that. But two, just the trajectory of your program and having watched you now the last couple years, I love the brand of football that you play. I love the way that your players play. So we want to get to know a little bit more about that, your story and everything. But first, I just want to throw it to you. What was that like going into Chicago yesterday, and what was it like getting that victory on the road?
No, I mean it's always great to win, right? So it's first and foremost, but play a great team kind of early in the year like that, where you can kind of tune up and see what you really got. We had two of them, and the Louisiana Christians in a little bit different boat right now with the coaching change and things like that. But we wanted to schedule a couple playoff teams right off the bat, and we did the Chicago trip a couple years ago. It's I don't want to say it's an easy trip, but kind of from two major cities and things like that. We're not traveling to the middle of nowhere in an NAIA school where you got a bus 5 hours from the closest airport or something. So good trip for us to get up there and get a good win and kind of keep moving forward.
Coach, I want to talk about your game plan yesterday. I thought offense, defense, special teams just executed very well. And again, you put that with the travel. And again, maybe not necessarily a difficult trip, but you're still traveling distance with that amount of players and, distractions and all those different things. But you came out focused and just executed flawlessly, offensively, defensively, special teams. So impressed with your balance offensively, so impressed with the way that you played defensively against that system, which is, it's the air raid system. They're all spread out. You challenge receivers, but then you played your safeties back to keep things in check with like a two-man concept and some things that you were doing defensively to really slow down that offense. Just from a football nerd guy, former coach, just watching your approach and the way that you execute the game plan so well, just very impressive.
No, I appreciate it, and it really has nothing to do with me. I'm the man in charge of it all, but we have some great assistant coaches, great coordinators, and some really good football players. So, no, they did a great job handling the trip. Credit to our leadership group and the seniors and everybody that's been involved in the program of kind of teaching these young guys what it takes to travel on the road and stay focused for a game and the things it's going to take to compete at the highest level. And now it's one of those beginning games, like totally different than Louisiana Christian, where there's a whole new coach and different system and no film and nothing really to go off of. One of those beginning games where you kind of just get out there and prepare for everything. And then kind of getting into St. Xavier, at least you got one game under your belt. You can see kind of what they did first and exchanging the playoff games from last year, kind of to end the season to see what we were kind of getting into. But our guys did a great job of preparing for the game. Our coaches did a great job of getting our guys ready and putting them in a position to be successful.
I really felt like your defense, there's an offensive guy in me that just wants to talk about Keely Watson, Rotavius Farmer, David Hayes, what they did. But I was, like Pat, very impressed with how your defense held them in check. And really in the first half, I'm watching that going like they don't have an answer on offense right now. They just a lot of underneath routes, a lot of short runs, just stifling those guys. So credit to your staff for that. Is there any, one or two moments that you look at, in that game or in that first half where you're like, okay, our defense has really got this figured out?
Well, and I think our defensive line is really good, led by Nick Engler, who's a fifth-year senior All-American. I mean, he's a different animal. We try to block him every day in practice, and it doesn't usually work out too well. But I thought the quarterback, I knew he was a good player. I knew he was coming back for his fifth year or a senior player, and gets the ball out quick. So I knew it was going to be kind of a struggle where it wasn't going to be every time where it gets some pressure on him to put him in bad situations. But I think towards the start of that game, when we really started to take away some of their short stuff, and I know they rely quite a bit on the screen game, is just like the run stuff from them and stuff like that. When we started to take away some of those things that I knew were going to be a staple and make them try to get the ball downfield quite a bit, I thought that there would be some advantages for us as the game went on. It's hard to do at any level. It's hard to throw the ball down the field like that nonstop. And I thought if we could take that away and force them into some of those situations, we'd have a pretty good shot at it as the day went on.
And the way you had the lead coach, you could turn that defensive line loose because it's going to be, they're playing from behind. Snacks going to play from behind. They're going to try to take the ball down the field. And you're right. I thought your defensive line just could, pin their ears back and go. And we're just such a difference maker, especially in that fourth quarter. Of really making plays. I mean, they were just outstanding. Those ends in particular were just tremendous. Love talking about your offense a little bit, Coach. Just the tremendous balance. I love balanced offense. I love seeing that combination, that near 50-50, run to pass ratio that you complement things so well with your RPO game as well. I just thought your quarterback played well, and the balance with the offense was just tremendous.
No, and that's what we strive to be. We'd love to be 50-50 across the board, but usually once you get into a game, even though you plan for it, depending on how that game's going, you get a little top heavy one way or the other. And we're fortunate to have a really good running back that's led the nation in rushing the past 2 years. So you got to make sure he gets his carries. And David, who had a really solid year, came on strong last year, is I think can have a breakout year for us this year. Had 12 catches yesterday for 100 and some yards. So. And Keely was a redshirt freshman last year. So those guys are kind of coming into their own, obviously more and more comfortable. And you got to run the ball, I think, to win championships. You got to run the ball and stop the run. And I think we can do that. But to have that complement where if you want to pack the box against us, we're going to have an answer, and you're going to leave one of those freaks we got out on the outside. You're going to leave one of them empty or one-on-one with somebody that I think we should hopefully have an advantage on. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that we've worked hard to recruit those type of guys. We've worked hard to develop them and to put it all together to make sure it's successful.
Hey, Coach, you said it, the freaks that you got outside, and that happened very early in the game yesterday. I was watching where Watson hit Hayes for that 75-yard pass, got back to the 35-yard line. We don't need to discuss that. But then right back to him again, right over the top. I'm watching that going, oh, wow, they're not going to have an answer for that guy. And they were able to slow him down a little bit, but back-to-back plays, Watson going to Hayes over that off the near sideline. It was evident that Hayes definitely had an advantage over the defensive backs for St. Xavier in that scenario.
No, and I think they have some really good players over there, obviously, but David was on a mission a little bit that game and was ready to go. And Keely's been throwing the ball well. So I think we saw some advantages, especially complementing, like you said, our RPOs and our run game to take advantage of what you want to do to try to stop that run is going to open up some of that other stuff. And David did a really good job with it. And we've been obviously repping a lot of that stuff to kind of take advantage of what we're going to get and have to keep developing him to move him around a little bit and kind of counter what are some of the things we're probably going to see in the future to try to take some of those targets away and stuff like that.
You know, Coach, we talked about this game. We've probably exhausted it. I like trying to bring coaches on during the off week, during the bye week, which you've got to bye, but then it's into Sun Conference play that you've got coming up. Heck of a conference. You've got, obviously the defending national champion in the conference, but you got a team like Southeastern, who we were talking about earlier on, beats Reinhardt, who was a top 25. I would foresee Southeastern being in the top 25 after this week. You got Florida Memorial, who's a very athletic, very offensively oriented team that can put up some points. You got one of the better running backs in the country in Ave Maria, plus a whole slew of other teams in there. So you've got a tough league you're going into. What do you feel like these first two games has helped to do prepare you for that league and for your league play?
Well, I mean, obviously we schedule these games because a couple of years ago, even though we were a fairly new program, I know what it feels like to be left out of the playoffs when you think you should be in and you got a really good football team. So it's kind of twofold. We schedule these playoff type teams in the nation that we think. We did it last year with Texas Wesleyan and Carroll and some of that stuff. Not only to get ourselves and make sure we're in the mix in that picture at the end of the season, depending on how this all shakes out, but also to prepare us for our conference, right? I think the thing that gets left behind in our conference a lot of times is the NAIA is very much an old school Midwest. These are the guys that have always been good. And I'm not saying Xavier is one of them. They've been a very good football team for a long time. And we got a lot of fairly new programs down here in the Sun Conference. And I think I would put our teams up from top to bottom against any league of how it shakes out, that there's I think some teams in the top 25 that a lot of the teams in the top half of our conference would give a pretty good run for their money. So it's exciting. It's fun. It makes it fun to play college football and play in those games week in and week out. But we schedule these first two games to prepare ourselves to getting in this league. Because right off the bat, we're coming back from this bye week with Florida Memorial. And not only are they a team on the rise, I think they are a team that's kind of should be in that receiving votes top 25 category as well. But they're 2 blocks from us. So not only are they a good football team now, and we've kind of grown into that as well. You got that backyard rivalry where anything goes kind of thing that you never know what you're going to get, and it's going to be an intense and fun atmosphere to play in. But it's one of those games, regardless of how good or how much you're building, it's going to come down to a dogfight in the end of it.
Coach, being a new program, can you talk just quickly? I know we're kind of getting away from maybe just this season, but kind of talk about the history and kind of the time frame where your program, has started to become to this point where you're getting some national attention. You talk about it. It's so fascinating to me seeing all these new teams in the Florida region, the southeast part of the United States, that are starting and having success. Can you give us like maybe the elevator speech of what your program has kind of how it started and where it is today?
Well, I've done it twice now. It's probably taken many years off my life, and I don't think I could ever do it again. But the gist of it is our president, he's a former college football coach. That's where he started in higher academics, really values the balance of academics and athletics and how that fits together in your college experience. So he and I started a small scholarship football program together up in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where we're both from. We kind of went our separate ways. I was down in Georgia. He was in Kentucky. And he took the job here. I called him up and said, "Hey, you don't have football there. You planning on starting it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "You want to be the coach?" I said, "Sure." And I'm leaving Georgia and I'm headed down in December of 2018 to start populating a football program. And I knew we'd doing this before. I didn't want to, and this was the beginning, not necessarily how the transfer portal and everything works right now, but I knew the core of the football program, we had to base this with freshmen and we had to recruit for the culture that we wanted to build. And we did that, populated the program year one. So I had a whole bunch of guys that were coming to visit campus with no field and no lockers and no jerseys and no nothing, kind of that spring of their senior years. And we're playing a varsity schedule in the Mid-South come that August. So we were fortunate. We had a hurricane evacuation before week one when we were playing Thomas More. Didn't even practice for like a week and brought them back and ended up going 4-6 that week or that year, first year, which was probably more than anybody besides the people in the building thought we would win. And then getting excited for the off season and, hey, we're going to have our first spring ball. We can really develop these guys. And there's COVID. So we roll into COVID year 2 and played our kind of abbreviated season. And then kind of where it really, I think, started to take off for us. Year 3, we got a lot better. And then in year 4 is when we went up to St. Xavier. And I guess year 3 we went up to St. Xavier and had that win up there, I think, when they were ranked number 16. So we started to schedule those games to get our name in the conversation. And I think after that, we got some kind of national recognition of that the team is on the rise and we're building. And then the past year that we had the 4th year and then 5th year, obviously we made the playoffs and had some wins, but we've been playing kind of these nationally ranked teams to kind of get our foot in the door and make sure that people are aware that we do have a good football team down here in South Florida.
You know, Coach, what you've done building the program has been tremendous. It's obviously not just you. You're a big part of it. President, the coaches around you and everything. But I go back and I look at, you know, I'm a coach's nerd. I'm one of those guys that looks at people's bios and goes, oh, okay. I take this back to college, you know, Larry Kerr's Mount Union, pretty good foundation set there in your collegiate playing days, 3 national titles. I mean, how much has the influence of what you had at Mount Union played into how you are as a football coach today?
Absolutely everything. That guy has a higher winning percentage than, Newt Rockney. Just everything I've learned about football, and it's kind of the tree I've been under, that for the most part, I've always worked with Mount Union guys or been under Mount Union guys early in my career. So not that we all do it the same, but there's pieces of that program all over the country of people coaching at the highest level of college football all the way down through high school. So extremely fortunate. And I think it shows you how to build a culture. It shows you what winning takes, even though as a player, you might not realize everything that a coach does or what goes into that, but there's just the atmosphere of what championship football is like. And I talked to Coach Karras last year after we had that playoff season, and it's about football, like with the things that you do. But some of the things that I had to do during that season last year, I would never know how to do if I didn't play for Mount Union under him. And not to brag on what we accomplished, but last year we were pretty fortunate to score a lot of points and have a lot of good offense last year as well. And some of those games got out of hand, and how to manage a game when you're winning by a lot and not trying to pour it on even more or get your other guys experience, or how to handle that. If you've never made the playoffs before and you got to deal with the Thanksgiving and how to play a game, I played in 4 Thanksgiving weekend games as a college football player. So I understood how to treat the team and the time off and where to navigate the Thanksgiving dinner and all that different stuff. So just the little things of championship football and how to build your program, but also things that if you've never been through it, you don't really understand how to deal with it, kind of from some obscure stuff like that.
You know, Jason, that might be the greatest college dynasty of all time. That period of Mount Union.
Oh, yeah.
Just unbelievable.
Yeah. We're not just saying that, Coach. We're football nerds, and we look at all the levels. It's like Mount Union during that
regular
time.
Season game in college. Did you coach?
No, I forgot about it now because I've been a part of too many losses potentially throughout my coaching career for 20 some years. But I was fortunate enough that I lost 1 game in college football, and it was the semifinals of the national playoffs.
I mean,
the craziest one.
Not fun, but pretty good.
Well, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
Coach, remind me, how many league games in a row did Mount Union win at one point?
I don't
how
know
many years of it? Was it 14
from like 93 to 2000? Had to be 5, 6, somewhere. I mean, it's over 12 years.
12 years of never losing a conference game.
The other thing about the playoffs of what it teaches you of why those teams get so good sometimes, and I preach it to our guys, the deeper you can go into the playoffs, obviously the goal is to win a national championship and to play at that highest level. But I played like a whole extra season of football, and that's for everybody involved in the program. That's 4 weeks of practices every year that nobody else gets. And at that level, especially before spring ball and everything else came to fruition, there is no spring ball. You're lifting weights the whole spring. So to have those extra practices and develop your young guys and all those different things, it all factors into it.
Just it's tremendous, Coach. And not to get too far off the subject, they were talking a little bit about playing days, Mountain Union, and all that, but it all kind of circles back to what you've got going here with St. Thomas. Obviously, you've got probably some big expectations of this team this year that you've got in, much like you would have had back in your playing days. What's your message to the kids week after week? Trying to stay focused to the goal and the big plans that you guys have got. What do you tell them after a big win like this?
Get better. And not to be the coach and everything else, that since we started this program and we knew what it was going to be like to have all these freshmen playing a varsity schedule and scholarship football, my message has been the same, that we're going to play week 1 and see how good we are. And after we get through week 1 and see how good we are, we're going to figure out how much better we can get for week 2 and what we have to correct and what we put on film that isn't good enough and people are going to exploit and everything else. And that message hasn't changed. That after we won week 1 last week, it was, okay, how much better can we be week 2? And we just won week 2, and it's how much better can we be when we get into week 3? And my message is, if we constantly do that if we can improve every week and lock down the stuff that we have to get better at that we put on film, by the time we get to the end of the year, we should be playing our best football, and we should be in a position, if we're fortunate enough, to compete at that national level. So I don't really care who we're playing. It's fun to play in these big games and against really quality opponents. But at the end of the day, we try to focus on ourselves and what we can do to get better every week, so we can make sure that we achieve some of our goals and we reach those expectations, and we embrace those expectations. I talk about it in recruiting, that even though we're a fairly young program, and I said this a couple of years ago when we were a really young football program, that we have expectations here, that this isn't like, hey, we just want to field a football team, and it goes through our whole athletic department. It's not, this is rec sports. I want this to be a part of your college experience, because I do what I do because I had a blast playing college sports, and it really helped me and defined my college experience along with my academics. And I want that the same for our student athletes. But you come here, you're living up to expectations that we want to win championships. It's not just to say, hey, I participated, I played in college. This isn't the YMCA or the rec league, that we have intentions to keep it to compete at the highest level.
Coach, you kind of answered probably part of my question, a two-part question for you, talking about this last week. I think a lot of folks that they're fans of the NAIA, like Jason and I are, and I was a part of it as a coach for a lot of years. If you can kind of give us a peek behind the curtain of your travel, the experience this weekend, because it was such a business trip and the way your team executed. Was it pretty seamless and fairly, I guess uneventful in a lot of ways, at least the travel part getting up to Chicago?
Yeah. That our travel, and like I said, we're extremely fortunate here that we have a lot of great support. So we chartered this trip.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when we fly these big ones, we usually charter. We've done it the other way. I've taken the bus rides to Kentucky. Year 1, we were on the bus to Kentucky, and we're 18 hours, 2-day trip there and straight back here. But we're fortunate enough to have enough support that we were able to charter it. So it makes it pretty easy that we practiced here in the morning. We get over to the airport, get on the plane, go up there. We actually went to Gary, Indiana, because it's cheaper than flying into Chicago. Landed in Gary, went over to our hotel, did our meals and stuff. Guys went to sleep. We woke up. You never know what you're getting into at the small scholarship level. We'd been to St. Xavier before, so we know we're getting into there, but you never know what kind of locker room setup and things like that you have. So my guys dress in the hotel, we tape in the hotel, we leave, and we hit the ground running once we get there, instead of trying to get all crammed into some closet to change and tape ankles and everything else. So again, we're pretty fortunate here, but we got some. When we go up to the conference school Thomas this year, that'll be a 2-day trip for us. That we'll go up, leave on a Thursday, practice somewhere on Friday, come straight through on the way home. But obviously, we're not busing to Montana last year or Texas Wesleyan. So some of these further trips, we're fortunate enough that we've chartered those. We've done commercial before as well. You get kids that lose their IDs in between the check-in to the security, and you got to figure it out. So that's another different hassle, especially when you're a football team. It's a little bit easier when you got volleyball or soccer or something, not as many numbers. But when you're taking a whole football team on a commercial, it's a little bit different dynamic.
Coach, you already touched on it. That's tremendous. I mean, you're getting your guys prepared for maybe what's down the road. I mean, this is about year 6 of your program. You've given your players an opportunity to understand plane travel in a big game, and you make it very businesslike, and you can see that in your performance yesterday. Just a tremendous job. Second part of my question. Go ahead, Coach. Sorry.
You say it's about the experience too, and this is everywhere you get into college athletics, I think. But our year one, when we went up to Kentucky and had our first win ever, I had guys that haven't even been past Broward County in South Florida, right? These guys, when we didn't play the way we needed to when we went out to Montana last year, but when they see the mountains, these kids, they're all from Florida and Georgia, and it's part of the experience. Half of them never been on a plane before, right? So you get them on a plane and they're nervous as heck and everything else to get out there, but that's part of the experience we can provide. That's just as much as football is real life and things they'll remember forever.
Did you give him a deep dish pizza after the win, though, at least?
I got one myself. The VP for philanthropy got me one. He was getting some for our president and the tailgate stuff that they had up there. My guys probably didn't even care. Regardless, they wanted the Chick-fil-A or whatever they got. But I sure had deep dish on the way home.
I guess the second part of my question, Coach. Sorry, Jason. I had one more part.
Yeah,
and I think you probably answered your rhetorical. Getting better, but you'll get a bye week here. You win a huge football game against a top 25 opponent in convincing fashion. This week, what's the main focus? I mean, obviously getting healed up after, playing two pretty good football teams back to back. But I know you're working on getting better, but is there another piece that's going to be huge for your team this week?
No, I mean, it's you get some extra days against the team that's coming up, but at the beginning of the week, we don't even focus on that. And I hate bye weeks. I would rather, I'm a football coach. There's too much distraction and you're not preparing for anything. It's like being back in camp again. Like I'd rather go like 11 or 12 straight. But it has its advantages that not that we're knock on wood doing okay injury wise and stuff, but let those guys rest, get their legs back and all those different things. I think last year we had the bye week right before we went and played Texas Wesleyan and played a really good game against them. And the difference I think was, so Butch Davis, NFL coach, major college coach, he helps us out as kind of a consultant. He's with us a couple of days during the week. He travels with us. Unbelievable resource for me. Tells me what I'm screwing up and what I need to do better and all those different things. But I really sat down with him and said, okay, when you were in the NFL and you got these bye weeks, how did you treat it? And when you were in major college football and you had a week off, whether it was Miami or North Carolina or FIU, how did you treat it? And we've really, I think, revamped our schedule a little bit to make the most of that opportunity, but promote the rest, give these guys mind to rest too a little bit. We had the first one postponed on us, so technically we're only into 2 or 3 weeks of the season, but they've been going for over a month here, right? They have their day off and everything, but it's not the same as a true day off where you're not really preparing mentally for anything. So give them a couple days and kind of recharge the batteries and things like that. I think that's the most important thing, is just to get back to as best you can be heading into that next game week.
Coach, final question for you, and then we'll let you get going. Cleveland, Ohio native, Mount Union is where you played. You went around to a lot of Midwestern colleges, Notre Dame, you were at Trine, you were at Coe College, and now you're in Miami. How has that adjustment been from kind of being, a Midwest guy? You could easily have just been in the same league as Pat the entire time, and you could have known him for the last 20 years as that assistant coach over that USF because you were coaching at, Marion or Indiana Wesleyan. But somehow your Midwestern roots have taken you south, and you are at St. Thomas in Miami Gardens, Florida. What has that been like, and what have been some of the differences for you in having to get down there as a coach and kind of go into an area that you're unfamiliar with?
Well, first off, I'm still an offensive lineman, body and heart. So the heat is a different animal down here, no matter which way you shake it. I was in Georgia for 3 years, and it's still not South Florida heat. And I've embraced that. We use it to our advantage of how we play football and the teams, I think, that come down here to play us, especially if they're not from Florida in our conference. But I talked to my buddies up there. They're still, obviously all over the country where they coach, but quite a bit in the Midwest. And they'll call me with recruits like, hey, I got this wide receiver. I got this running back. I got this guy. I go, I got 15 of them that are within 5 miles radius of my campus. Like I'm not bringing that kid from Indiana or Ohio. So I think the difference is they're all great kids. Everybody's got different personalities of where you grew up and from the Midwest, from South Florida, from out West, from the East Coast, wherever it might be, but everybody recruits Florida. So the familiarity with recruiting and relationships and that, I've been recruiting Florida since we were up in Cleveland and up in when I was at Ohio Northern over in Idaho, Ohio, that we've always recruited Florida. The difference is instead of having 15 or 20 of them on your team, I got like 150 of them, right? So it's that's the difference, that we have a ton of talent, but a ton of different personalities and things that come to fruition. And South Florida is a different animal itself, where we've really prided ourselves in doing a great job recruiting across the state in Tampa and Fort Myers and Jacksonville, but that's not the same as South Florida either. So it's kind of just like anywhere else, developing that melting pot of what you want your team to be and how you want to build your culture and what standards you want to set and all that different stuff. But from a personal standpoint, I will never go back. I love Cleveland, Ohio. I love the Midwest. My parents actually went up to the game with us because my sister lives in Chicago. Love it all. We'll go back in the summer when it's nice and do that type of stuff. But when your kids are jumping in the swimming pool on Christmas Day and you're going to the Orange Bowl the week of New Year's and it's still 75, 80 degrees out, you can't beat it.
It's tremendous, Coach. It's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for your time. That's why I always try to get guys on an off week. I want to be respectful of that. We've gone way over the amount of time that I said I'd have you on the show. But, thanks for coming on, Coach. This has been great getting to talk to you a little bit and get to know a little bit about your program.
No, I appreciate you guys. And again, everything you're doing for NAIA football week in and week out to promote the teams and get looks on the different players and stuff. I really appreciate everything you guys kind of bring to the table to bring some recognition to the product we're putting out.
It's awesome, Coach. We're glad to have coaches like yourself that are a part of it. We're going to go ahead and wrap things up here for the entire show. For Pat Donley, for Coach Bill Rychel, I'm Jason Dannelly. This has been NAIA Football with Dannelly and Donley from the Victory Sports Network.